Okay, evening folks, and today I'm going to get into showing you a really quick sort of motion graphic technique where you can morph shapes, and it looks something like this. Okay, so we're going to look at some popular techniques using the shape tool and ways that you can achieve a look like this, or really just sort of the processes to create this look, which you can be a bit more creative with if you spend a little bit more time on it. I've just created a very quick kind of demo so you get an idea and a sense of what you can create. Just before we move on, just quickly show you the kind of keyframing that you'll be doing, or you could get into with creating this. So as you can see here, it's a lot of it is using the path tool and the keyframing the path on your morph shapes, and really that's about it. So we'll go through all these techniques, showing you the easies, keyframe assistant and things like that. So just hitting the tilde key to bring it back to here, and hitting the keyboard shortcut U to collapse all our layers. So some quick keyboard shortcuts there. So the tilde key is the button on the Mac that I'm using right now, Mac keyboard. It's positioned next to the 1 on your numerical, on your number pad. And yeah, it basically solos the section that you're looking at. Another keyboard shortcut, if you make sure that there's two ways you can do this. If you click on a layer and hit U, it will show you keyframes that have been placed in that layer. But if you want to see all your keyframes, you just make sure no layers are selected, and again hit U once. So that's U on the keyboard, and it opens up all of the keyframes, and you press it again once more to collapse it. So some really quick shortcut tasks there as well. Okay, so let's get into this. I'll create a new composition. So this first composition, I'm just going to call this shapes, and we're not going to set this to any particular dimension. We are going to set it at 1000 by 1000. And there's a reason I'm doing it as a square, which we'll get into in a little bit, and I'm just going to make sure my duration is 10 seconds. So with my composition now active, we're going to go to the shape tool up here, and I'm going to start off with the ellipse tool, which double clicking it will create a circle. And this should, have I got my composition wrong? Hang on a second, composition settings. So 1000 by 1000, make sure this is set to square pixels, apologies. Just delete this for a second. Okay, so just make sure that your composition is set to square pixels, and double click again the ellipse tool, and now we have a perfect circle. Now I don't want this to be have a fill, so we're just going to click on the text, fill text, and we're just going to put a strike through it. And we are going to have a stroke, so again just press the stroke icon, and we want to just make that a solid stroke and hit OK, and 10 pixels is fine. You can do yours more or less depending on your style. And it's okay that it's cropping the sides off, that's not too important. While we're here, just good management, I'm going to rename this one circle. And again, now we're going to create another shape, and I'm going to go for a polygon, so double click the polygon. Now with polygon, you can change the faces, so when your poly shape layer is active, you just go down, drop down contents. So to drop down all these options, you just press on these little down arrows, or these little arrows that are facing to the side, and we can drop down contents, polystar contents, and polystar path. We can then adjust how many points you would like to change. So we're just going to click on that, and I'm going to change it to 8 to make it more of a hexagon. Actually, let's go for 6. Okay, so there we go. So it's more like a polygon with 6 sides. Okay, now I'm going to go on, again, I'm just going to change the name to poly. And while we're here as well, I'm going to duplicate this poly, and this time with poly 2, I'm going to make it into a hexagon and give it 8 sides. And duplicate the poly again, And in fact, I'm not going to duplicate it. This time I'm going to go to the star tool and double click the star. And this time the star, we are going to change a couple of the, what am I looking for? The radiuses. So I am just going to Control Z, keep that the same. We're going to go for the inner radius, and I'm just going to pull that out slightly so it's a bit bigger, like so. And so that this tutorial doesn't get too large, we're going to keep it at that. Okay, let me just get rid of these two here. Right, so with these created, I'm now going to click on the new layer icon, new composition icon, and this time I'm going to call this the morph. Oh, my bad, I pressed enter by accident. This time I'm going to call this the morph shoot, and this time round I'm going to choose 1080-25. So again, this is 1920 by 1080. All that is correct, and I'm just going to hit OK. So now I have my HD icon like so. So at this point, I'm going to just create a nice background color. So go to right click, new, solid, and I'm going to keep this cyan, make comp size, and hit OK. Now what I'm going to do is jump over to the shapes composition and just move these around so it's easier to navigate to. And I'm just going to hit Control C to copy the circle and Control V to paste the circle. Now it's got a bit confused with itself, so at this point over here on the right hand side you should have one that says align, so just drop down the align options and we're going to align it in the center and the middle. Now earlier on you'll have noticed I said it doesn't matter if these are like that, and this is the reason why. So with our circle now selected, I'm just going to hit S to bring the scale down so it's better on the screen, and I'm just going to fit this to the full composition window, and I can now move this out a little bit as well. Happy days. Okay, so for the rest of the tutorial that we're going to be using, we're just basically going to be adding path shapes to this one shape. So I'm just going to change the name now of this circle to morph 1, and we want to drop down the morph 1 options and drop down the contents of the morph 1, drop down the ellipse, and where it says ellipse path we're going to right click this and convert to a Bezier path. What this is going to do is remove the ellipse properties, and it converts it so that if I just press this icon to show you what's happening, we can see the path of the circle. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and we've got a perfect circle. Now at this point, just take note that our starting vector is here, and usually you know that it's the start point vector due to the nature of the secondary square just around the little one. And I'm actually going to change that to this one by just selecting it, going to mask and shape path, and set the first vertex. Sorry, the vertex, not the Bezier. Okay, so I'm going to keep that there and drop down the options to path. So now we're going to keyframe. We're going to move 1 second and then press the stopwatch. So what this is telling After Effects is to stay the same shape for 1 second. And on the 2-second mark, we're now going to jump back over to our shapes layer. We can turn off circle. In fact, let's turn off all the layers so that we can see exactly the one we're going to select. So we're in poly, going to drop down poly again, drop down contents. We're going to do the same thing as we did on the previous layer. So we're going to right click this poly path and convert to a Bezier path. We're then going to drop down the path 1 options and make sure you select that path here and hit Command C or Control C to copy the path. Then jump back over to our morph toot. Now with path selected here, make sure, again it's important, so if you just select path 1 and paste it, it's just going to convert the circle to a polygon. So we want to make sure that that path is also selected and hit Command V. Now you'll notice that it's changed the shape, but it's also added a keyframe. So if we jump back to 1 second, we can see what's happening here. So the animation looks like this. Now we're getting a little bit of odd movement happening at the top, and that's because we changed the vertex path from the top here to this point here. So just to correct that, you can see how it's moving. What I'm going to do is actually go back and put the start position back up here. So I'm just going to hold shift, click, and then click one more time, right click, and change the vertex to the first vertex there. So now we should see a more natural animation. So it's looking a little bit better. There's a little bit happening here, but we'll correct that later on. Okay, so I'm just going to move these keyframes around a little bit. I'm actually going to move that further to the beginning, move that further down. Okay, so again, jumping over to shapes, we're just going to repeat this process now until we get all our areas. I'm not actually going to bother with that one again. It's just for the speed of this tutorial. We're just going to copy this process and until we get 3 shapes at least. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so now what I'm going to do to make the animation a little bit less, so while we press play, the stops between each one could be better. So we're going to select all of these keyframes, right click them, and we're going to go to keyframe assistance and we're going to easy ease them in. So this should just smooth in the animation to each one. Now at this point it's going a little bit too quick. Now there's a few ways we could slow it down. Essentially what we could do is grab each keyframe and just move them further apart. I could move all of them together. But if you want to keep them in the same position but spread them evenly, make sure all 3 keyframes are selected and then hold Alt and click, and can you see what's happening there? It stretches them out but it keeps the space between them even. So this is different to just select. If you don't hold Alt, all it does is move them in sync, and you can move them independently, but to do that you just make sure all 3 are selected, hold Alt and then grab one of the ends and pull apart and it'll move uniform. So now we have a slower animation. So that is essentially the tutorial. At this point you can just get more creative. Potentially you might want to duplicate the morph, so you just press the layer and hit Ctrl or Command D. This duplicates it, then hit S on the keyboard to scale and scale the second one down, and then you'll have 2 animations copying each other. Like so. And then earlier on I actually swapped over the fill and turned off the stroke, and again then you've got something that looks like so. So this could be quite good if you were. So this technique works not only for the shapes that are built into After Effects, but you can also make your own custom shapes, and you can copy the exact same process. If you create your shapes in Illustrator, you can bring in the Illustrator file, and then you can right click the Illustrator file and create an After Effects shape and do the exact same process. So you can do this in multiple programs to bring into After Effects. So this technique's quite powerful. But that is essentially it. I'm going to show you one more technique that you can create. So say for example, if you want the outer layer to animate or something like that, like the path itself to animate, or you want to add maybe some, I don't know, some extra shapes. Let's grab our pen tool and just create. So I'm just creating a wavy line. Again, turn off the fill and turn on the stroke and change it to 4 pixels. So if I wanted this shape to animate in, so it gives it sort of like a, I don't know, simple animation. So we can do a few things here. Go into contents, So I'll show you this as an example technique. So we're just going to zoom in, press space, hold space to drag the window around. So what I'm going to do is just round off these ends. So go into shape again, go to stroke, and we're going to change it from butt cap to round cap. And you'll notice now, if I just turn this off for a second, you can see that that's gone from being completely flat to rounded. It's a small little thing, like so. Now, if we want this to animate in, at this point, what we can do is navigate over to, we've got to create it, we've got to add to it. So in contents, next to add, we're going to add a trim path. So a trim path is as it says it is. It's a path that allows you to trim. And what do we mean by this? Well, if I increase or decrease one of the start or end sections, we can have it starting off or ending. So we could have it go back to the beginning. We could animate the end at 0 and go to 100. So it creates this kind of thing. Again, just keyframe these. Keyframe assistant, easy ease. What this will do is slow down and speed up the line as it gets closer to the end. Now, if we wanted the line to follow itself, we could also keyframe the start. And move that to there. Oh, sorry, all three have selected. I just want to turn off the offset. And start off at 100. So just offsetting these two, you'll see what this does in just a second. So it follows it, and again, if you want to adjust these slightly, and create something like that. Now, if you want this to move a lot faster, again, holding all of these, holding Alt and clicking. Oh, it's not doing it. Hold Alt and click. We can pull them all in again a little bit together to do something like so. And if you like this shape, we can just zoom out so we can see how this is all looking. We could duplicate this one, grab it, move it over here so we have both of them starting at the same time. We could then select both of them by holding Shift, hitting Control D, and we could just move these ones further around. And again, this will then allow us to have two different animations. We could then hit rotation, and we could just rotate these slightly. And again, just drag them in differently. So there's loads of different things we could do with this while stuff like this is happening. So just as a quick one, the shape, what you can do with shapes can be quite expansive, and you can get more creative and add your own designs in there. As you can see here, something we've done quite basic. We've made something quite basic, quite advanced. So what you do with the shapes is entirely up to you, but just to give you an idea of some of the things you can do, and pretty much any shapes, your own custom shapes, custom squiggles, and you can start to sort of really make your animations jump out, your motion design techniques jump out really quickly. So hopefully you found this tutorial interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.